All right, so today we're diving deep into how rice plants fight off those nasty viruses.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack some really cool research from nature about a brand new defense mechanism they found and what it could mean for farming. Are you ready?
Absolutely. This paper is really interesting.
Okay, so picture this rice plants out in the field just chilling, and then boom, they get attacked by the rice stripe virus or RSV. It's a pretty big problem.
Right.
Now, plants don't have an immune system like us humans do. So how in the world do they fight back?
That's the big question, and this research really helps clarify how that happens.
So spill the beans. What do they find?
Well, they discovered a key piece of the puzzle. It's this protein called RBRL. And get this, it's the first ever receptor that's been discovered for a plant virus.
Oh, the first ever.
Yeah, the very first.
Wow, that's got to be a huge deal in the plant science world.
Oh, it definitely is. Before this discovery, we really didn't know how plants recognize viruses, at the molecular level. So this is a big step forward in understanding plant immunity.
So walk me through this. How does this RBRL protein actually work?
Okay, so imagine RBRL as like a security guard for the plant cell. It's just sitting there scanning for any signs of trouble, and when it spots a virus, it grabs onto its coat protein, or CP.
So the plant has a specific protein that can actually detect the virus. That's wild.
It really is. And the way it works is like a lock and key RBRL is the lock, and the viral CP is the key. And when those two fit together, boom, it sets off this whole chain reaction inside the plant cell.
Okay, so then what happens next? This is where things start to get really interesting, right? Because the paper mentioned something called an E3 ligase. What is that thing?
Ah, yes, the E3, well, think of it like a cellular hitman. It basically tags other proteins for destruction, kind of marks them for termination.
So it sounds like RBRL finds the virus, calls in this E3 hitman, and destroys it. Case closed, right?
Well, not quite. There's a twist.
Ooh, I love a good twist. So tell me what happened.
The viral coat protein isn't actually the target at all. Instead, RBRL directs that E3 ligase hitman to take out a completely different protein called NINJA3.
NINJ3. Now, that's a name that grabs your attention. Is this some kind of plant ninja warrior or what?
Haha, not exactly, but it does play a crucial role in this whole defense strategy. You see, NINJA3 is like the bouncer at a plant party. It keeps the jasmonate defense hormones out, preventing them from getting the party started, or in this case, the defense response.
Okay, I'm trying to picture this plant party.
Mm-hmm.
All the plant cells hanging out, having a good time, and then NINJA3 is there at the door, arms crossed, keeping all the jasmonates out. But what happens when RBRL shows up?
Well, RBRL, with its trusty sidekick, the E3 ligase hitman, takes care of that bouncer, NINJA3.
So basically, they take him out.
Yeah, essentially. And with NINJA3 out of the picture, the jasmonate hormones can finally get into the party, and they ramp up the plant's defenses big time.
So it sounds like RBRL isn't just a security guard. It's more like a strategic mastermind. It identifies the threat and then figures out this whole chain reaction to neutralize it. That's incredible.
Exactly, and this is a completely new way of thinking about how plants control their immune response, especially when it comes to the jasmonate pathway. And, the really exciting part is what this means for the future. Just imagine a world where we can engineer crops that are naturally resistant to viruses, without needing all those pesticides.
Now, that would be a total game changer. We're talking about a revolution in agriculture.
Yeah.
But how do we actually go from this discovery in a lab to, fields full of super resilient rice?
Well, that's where the real innovation comes in. Think of this RBRL discovery as a blueprint. Now that we know how this defense mechanism works, we can actually start tinkering with it.
Tinkering, huh? Sounds like we're about to enter the world of plant genetic engineering.
You got it. One approach is to boost the activity of that RBRL protein, in rice varieties that are already popular with farmers and already produce a lot of rice.
So rice that can basically fend off RSV and all these other viruses all on its own, even out in the fields.
Exactly.
That could be huge for farmers, especially in those regions where RSV is a major problem.
Absolutely, and it's not just limited to rice either. Scientists can look for similar mechanisms in other staple crops too. Things like wheat, corn, even soybeans.
So this one discovery in rice could lead to a whole new generation of disease-resistant crops. It's kind of like a domino effect.
Exactly, and the implications go way beyond just protecting crops. We're talking about reducing our reliance on those chemical pesticides.
Which is good for the environment and for us.
Exactly. Less pesticide use means less pollution, healthier ecosystems, and safer food for everyone. It's a win-win-win situation.
I like the sound of that.
And there's another really interesting avenue we could explore, biopesticides.
Biopesticides, I've heard that term before, but remind me how those work.
Sure. So instead of using synthetic chemicals, Biopesticides use natural elements to fight off those pesky pests. And you know what? This research on NINJA3 might actually hold the key.
Wait, you're saying we could use this knowledge about NINJA3 to create biopesticides? How does that work?
Okay, so imagine this. We develop a biopesticide that specifically targets that NINJA3 protein in the insects that attack those rice plants.
Okay.
By messing with their jasmonate pathway, we can basically disarm their defenses and make them more vulnerable.
So we're basically using the plant's own defense strategy against the insects that are trying to eat it.
Exactly. And because it targets a specific protein, it's much less likely to harm all those beneficial insects, like bees and butterflies.
That's a huge improvement over those broad-spectrum chemical pesticides that can have so many unintended consequences.
Right, and that's just scratching the surface. We could potentially use similar approaches to fight fungal diseases or even bacterial infections in plants. The possibilities are really endless.
This is all sounding incredibly promising, but
Yeah.
are there any potential downsides we should be thinking about? Gene editing, biopesticides, messing with natural systems. It seems like there's always a risk of unintended consequences.
Oh, you're absolutely right. With any new technology, especially when it comes to manipulating living organisms, there's always a need for careful research and rigorous testing, and of course, open discussion about the potential risks and benefits.
So it's not just about the science, it's about responsible innovation, making sure we're not creating new problems while we're trying to solve the old ones.
Exactly. But, despite the challenges, this research really does represent a major leap forward in our understanding of plant immunity and its potential applications. It opens up this whole new toolkit for creating a more sustainable and food-secure future.
It's amazing to think that it all started with this tiny protein RBRL standing guard in a rice plant. Who knew something so small could unlock such huge possibilities.
That's the beauty of science, isn't it? Sometimes the biggest discoveries come from the smallest places, and in this case, it could have a massive impact on how we feed the world. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. The tiny little protein RBRL is part of this battle that's been raging on for millions of years.
Wait, what do you mean? You talking about evolution?
Exactly. This discovery with rice, it's not just some random one-off event. It gives us this glimpse into this epic evolutionary arms race between plants and everything that tries to infect them, viruses, bacteria, fungi, you name it.
So it's like plants have been developing their own defenses for ages, constantly adapting to these new threats that come along.
Exactly. And the pathogens are not just sitting around either. They're evolving too, trying to find ways to outsmart those plant defenses. It's this constant back and forth, each one pushing the other to evolve.
And RBRL and NINJA3, this whole system we've been talking about, that's just one example of how plants have evolved these incredible defense mechanisms, right?
It's the perfect example. Think about it. The rice plants with the most effective RBRL.
Yeah.
They were the ones that could survive those RSV attacks, right? They're the ones that got to reproduce and pass those genes down to their offspring.
So over time, natural selection favored those rice plants that had this awesome defense system, survival of the fittest plant style.
That's evolution in action. And it really makes you wonder, what other defense mechanisms are plants hiding? What other secrets are waiting to be uncovered?
That's a good question. But here's something that I've been wondering. If plants have all these amazing defenses, why do they still get sick at all? Shouldn't they be invincible by now?
Haha, that's a great question, and it highlights a really important point. Evolution never stops. It's this ongoing process. So as plants are evolving these new defenses, pathogens are evolving new ways to get around them.
So it's like a never-ending game of cat and mouse.
Exactly. And this whole discovery with RBRL and NINJA3, it's just one round in this epic battle, but it gives us this crucial insight into how plants are fighting back, and that knowledge is really powerful.
So what does all of this mean for the future of agriculture, especially when we're facing all these challenges like climate change and a growing population that we need to feed?
Well, it means that we need to rethink how we approach crop protection instead of relying only on chemical warfare. We can start working with nature. We can harness the power of plant immunity to create these more sustainable and resilient farming systems.
So it's not just about fighting diseases, it's about building this partnership with nature, using what we're learning about plant evolution to create a more secure and sustainable future for agriculture.
That's the goal, and research like this is paving the way. It's showing us that the solutions to some of our biggest challenges might be right there hidden within the plants themselves.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. We've gone from a tiny protein in a rice plant to a whole new understanding of plant immunity evolution and the future of agriculture. It's amazing what you can learn when you really take a deep dive into the science.
I completely agree. It just goes to show that the smallest discoveries can sometimes have the biggest impact.
And to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on the deep dive. If you want to explore this research further, be sure to check out the full paper in Nature. You can find the link in our show notes. And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the wonders of science.